I don't know where the name came from. I'm assuming my mother picked Kathleen because she liked it. Williams was my father's last name, and Ging is my husband's name.
Was it Kathy at work, or was it Kathleen?
Usually Kathy.
Okay. And did you have nicknames growing up?
Yes. In about 5th grade, I went to Catholic school, and there were 5 Kathleens. It was a very popular name at the time. So we all got nicknames, and mine became Willie. And the nickname Willie stuck through grade school, high school, and even some of my college friends.
And even, does it stick to this day?
Yes, it does. A handful of people that I've known through grade school and high school still.
All right, there's history there.
Still call me Willie.
Okay.
Yes.
What would you like me to call you while we're talking here?
Kathy's fine.
Kathy's fine?
Yeah.
Okay. Then what is your present family situation, Kathy? Tell us where you live and who's at home with you.
Okay. I live in Huntington Station, which is actually where I grew up. I was born in Huntington Hospital. And when I was growing up in Huntington, I thought it was the end of the earth because you couldn't get anywhere without a car, and I felt it was very isolating and figured I am never going to live here. And then I went away to college and came home because I had no money and ended up staying there for the rest of my life. Now I live in Huntington Station with my husband and my daughter.
When were you born?
I was born September 14th, 1950.
And you were born in Huntington Hospital?
In Huntington Hospital. And my father was born in Huntington Hospital, which is unusual. Most people that you meet on Long Island, their parents moved out from the city, but my father was born in Huntington Hospital also in 1920.
Wow, okay, so he's a real native.
Yes, he is.
Okay. What about his parents?
His parents were both born in Pennsylvania. My grandfather was Welsh, of Welsh ancestry. I think his great-grandfather came from Wales. My grandmother was Irish. Her maiden name was Mary Malarkey, and she became Mary Williams. So my father's side of the family is Welsh-Irish.
What was their field? What was their occupation in Pennsylvania? What did they do there?
I'm not sure what he did originally in Pennsylvania. When they moved to Long Island, he was a supervisor of nurseries or a landscaper for large estates. So he actually worked for Bernard Baruch on the Baruch estate and supervised a nursery on Bagatelle Road.
Okay, so it's not so much, it's the horticulture
yes.
end of it.
That was my grandfather.
Uh-huh. And what did your dad do growing up in Huntington?
My dad was a butcher, a meat cutter. He started apprenticing when he was 14 years old. After high school, went into the Army and became a mess sergeant and had lots of great stories about cooking for the troops and bartering with the natives when they were in France to get fresh things for the troops, kind of like Catch-22.
And this would have been during World War II?
World War II, yeah. Mm-hmm. And then when he came out of the service, he joined the Meat Cutters Union, and that's what he did his whole life.
At a shop in Huntington? Or
he worked in supermarkets when I was young, and then later on in smaller butcher shops, you know, that friends of his owned.
Yes. What about, since we're talking about Dad and your father's side of the family, how about your mom? Tell me about her background, where she came from.
Okay. Both of my mom's parents were born in Poland, but I believe they met here.
Your mom was born here?
My mom was born here in Bayside, but moved to Huntington when she was 2 years old. And my parents lived 2 blocks from one another, so they knew each other in high school, I think they met. But my mom's family was Polish, all Polish.
So they went through Huntington school system?
South Huntington.
South Huntington, okay.
They both graduated from South Huntington High School.
Okay.
And my mom worked as a secretary. Before she was married, she worked for South Huntington School District. And then after, she had 3 children. I have an older brother, a younger brother. And when my younger brother went to school, my mother went back to work as a secretary in South Huntington Schools.
And what about her parents? What did they do? What were their...
Her father owned a small grocery store
Ah,
that catered to the Polish population in Huntington Station. There was a fairly large Polish neighborhood, and there was a Polish American Hall, and we would go there for parties and stuff.
it seems to me, I can remember a time, I know now there's a Polish community out east, around Riverhead.
Mhm.
But there was a time when there were potato farms on Pulaski Road.
Yes. I can remember that too. Yeah.
And they have to harvest, going up and picking what was still there.
Yeah.
So you really have a family of native Long Islanders, you might say.
Yeah.
They've been here a long time. Tell me about your daughter.
I could go on forever. My
Go ahead.
daughter is wonderful. I didn't get married until I was 40 years old. So I had my daughter when I was 41. She's now 17. And she's fabulous. She's very bright, talented. She sings. She's an artist. She's great.
And where does she get that from? What side of the family does that come from?
We have no idea where the art comes from. No, I shouldn't say that. My older brother was a bit of an artist. My husband has a beautiful voice, so her voice must get from her father, not me.
So she's got a music gene there, but
Yes.
she also has an art gene.
Yes.
And what form does that take? Does she paint? Does she draw?
She draws. In school, she's taking painting. She's taking fashion design. I would like to see her do something with that in the future, but I don't know what direction she'll choose to take.
So she doesn't have a direction yet, a goal yet. She's just exploring.
She's exploring.
Knowing
She's a
what she
senior in
enjoys.
high school now,
Okay.
and she's a very good writer.
Oh,
I would envision her doing some of the maybe writing and art, but who knows what
who knows?
what
Exactly.
path she will take.
And she might change her mind 4 times before
Yes.
she finally
Mhm.
decides. Tell me about your husband. What's his name and how did you guys meet?
Okay, there actually is a Brentwood connection there. My husband's name is Timothy Patrick Ging. You can tell there's a little Irish in that family also. We met through the daughter of someone I worked with at East Junior High School. We were introduced on a blind date by Marilyn Flamberg is the name of the woman I used to work with. Her daughter Lynn Flamberg went to college with my husband. And Lynn and her now husband introduced my husband and I.
Okay. It was a date, first date, a blind date? Or?
They invited us to their apartment in Brooklyn. We had dinner, went to a movie, went back and talked, and
Something happened.
yes, that was
So
That was it.
how long did you know one another before you decided to tie the knot?
probably about 1.5 years, though I did have to give him an ultimatum because he really was a little gun shy about getting
He
married.
was Irish after all.
Yeah, and so I just kind of, after a while, said, I'm not getting any younger here. Either this is going to go somewhere or it's not, and I have to know by the end of the year. So, Christmas, I got a ring. And my ring was actually his mother's.
And what year was that?
Now you put me on the spot here. Christmas, 1989.
Okay. All right. Well, what does he like to do when he's having fun?
He's someone who needs to have projects all the time. He's not real good at leisure, though he was a theater major in college. So he does love the arts. He loves to listen to music. We do go to a lot of shows. But he likes projects. He does stained glass sometimes. We have some stained glass windows in our house that he's made. He crochets. He knits. He likes to do things with his hands. And then, of course, he also, fixes things around the house. He's very handy.
Kathy, what's your passion? What do you enjoy doing?
Oh, I love to dance.
Do you?
I started taking
Ballroom?
No.
Oh,
Right now it's mainly tap dancing.
Oh.
I started taking class when I was 4 years old, and basically, except for a few years here and there, have never stopped. I took all through grade school, high school, even in college. I ended up going to a college that had a very good dance department, and I found out you could take dance classes instead of phys ed classes, and that worked for me. The only time I really didn't dance at all, after college, I went into the Peace Corps. So during those 2 years I didn't dance. But once I came back to the States, I started taking class again.
When did you join the Peace Corps?
Right out of college.
Which would have been?
1971.
And where did you go? What did you do?
I went to Peru, and it happened that the college that I went to had a special program called the College Degree Program, and they recruited, math and science majors. And I was a math major, and it sounded exciting to me to do. And it was something I always admired when I first heard about the Peace Corps when I was, in junior high, I guess. But I didn't think it was something that I would be able to do. It sounded too difficult. But when I got in college and I met people who were in training, they were all like, nah, it's not that tough. So I joined the college degree program and ended up going to Peru for 2 years. And I trained, I did teacher training courses, basically, with elementary school teachers in math and science methods.
And so when you went to Peru, is that what you did?
That's what I did.
You taught?
I taught.
Mm-hmm. At the elementary level?
Well, no, I taught teachers. I taught elementary school teachers.
Oh, okay.
So it was basically, I taught in-service courses for elementary school teachers on math and science methods and making hands-on materials for them to use in their classrooms.
And was this done in a city, or was this in a rural area?
Both. I was stationed in Huancayo, Peru, which is up in the mountains, which was a fairly large city. That's where the Ministry of Education was. But then we were sent out to smaller towns. So I would plan my course at the Ministry of Education, and then they would tell me where I was going to go. And I would go to a town and stay there for 6 or 8 weeks, work with the teachers, and then I would come back to the ministry. We'd plan the next course, and I would go out to a different town.
So you became fluent in Spanish?
Yes.
Peru, I've always thought of as being one of the poorer countries in the hemisphere. Is that true or no?
I don't think so. They're very rich in minerals, and it's a very rich agricultural country. They've been taken advantage of by other nations in the past, so they always haven't reaped the wealth of their own riches.
How did you find yourself being accepted there? Were you accepted?
Oh, definitely.
Right off.
And it was an interesting time to go because I did go in 1971. For myself, it was the only difficult part about joining the Peace Corps was because it was during the Vietnam War, and I had been active in college protesting the war. So the idea of becoming a government employee was a little dicey at that time, but I reconciled it with the idea that at least it would be a positive experience supported by our government as opposed to a violent one. So the people were fabulous. The people, even then, even though you would see anti-Nixon signs painted on the side of buildings, they were able to separate that from individuals. And they thought it was amazing that a young person would leave their family and move down to a country where they knew no one and to work with them. And they were very appreciative. And
would you still advise this as a choice for a young person today?
Definitely.
Yeah.
It is, other than maybe having my daughter, it was the most positive thing I've ever done in my life.
Isn't that exciting? Now, what school prepared you for this? What was
it was a State University College at Brentwood, New York.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go back to when you were a little girl in Huntington Station. What's your earliest memory?
Probably kindergarten. I was chosen to play Goldilocks in the kindergarten play. And that's one of my earliest memories. I have a few memories around the age of 5. That's also when my younger brother was born.
Mm. Okay.
And I remember him being brought home from the hospital and laid on my parents' bed. But around 5 years old are my first clear memories.
And that would have been a much smaller Huntington hospital than it is today.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm. Probably some of the earliest buildings or the original buildings were still being used when your brother was born.
I don't know.
Yeah. You've told us about your mother and father's ancestry. Have you ever been to your grandparents' birthplaces? Have you ever gone
No,
to Wales or
neither of my parents knew a lot about their ancestry. My mother doesn't even know the name of the town that her parents were born in. I've started doing a little bit more research on the Williams side, but I still haven't gotten back to a birthplace of my great-grandparents. I have been to Ireland, though. I mean, I love Ireland. It's beautiful. I've been there twice.
Okay.
But
where did you go in Ireland?
the first time we toured around, I went with 2 other women, one other Brentwood teacher at the time, and we went to Dublin.
Do we know who that was?
Gail Inzerillo,
Oh, yes.
Littella,
Sure.
and her friend Eileen, who didn't teach, but should have because she hung out with Brentwood people so much. And we did the southern, Smile. We did Dublin, down around over to the Ring of Kerry, up to Shannon, and flew home. And then just a few years ago, I went with my husband and daughter because my husband his older brother has researched his family history and knew where their great-great-grandfather was born. So we did go to his family town.
You had two brothers.
Yes.
A younger one and an older one. Tell me about your brothers.
My older brother, Paul, was 3 years older than I. He and I were very close. He was the artistic one. He, in high school, didn't quite know what he wanted to do after high school. Took 1 or 2 courses at Nassau Community, and then was drafted. Those were the times, and served 15 months in Vietnam. Came home right before my high school graduation in 1968. In fact, he was in Los Angeles when Bobby Kennedy was assassinated on his way back from Vietnam. But he made it home for my graduation party. But he was changed. He was very anti-war when he came home, but stayed in the military because they offered him money to re-up. And just, there are many stories there. He was separated from the family for a while, didn't communicate with us, and then we were reunited. He was married, had 1 son, my nephew Jason, and then he left his wife, and again didn't communicate with the family for a while, and he died when I was pregnant with my daughter. He died of AIDS.
I'm sorry.
So, but he was a wonderful person.
I guess we don't have to say any more about how war can change people and what it does to throw a hand grenade into your life, too,
Right.
sometimes. A lot of vets have the same experience. What about your other brother?
My other brother, Joe, is 5 years younger than I am, though he looks older, because he's bald. But as different from my older brother as 2 brothers could be, very into sports, always. Growing up, still now, he's 50-something and playing softball and basketball. But he lives, he also ended up going to the same college I did, and he's married with 3 girls, and he lives in Smithtown, and, we see each other all the time.
Did either your mother or your father drop little nuggets of wisdom that have given you touchstones of your own identity, that when you look at it, these are lessons that you carry with you that have come from the family. And I'm asking you about mom and dad because very often they are our most important teachers. There are things that your father used to say or your mother used to say that you remember.
Not specifically.
Okay.
I think they taught more by their actions.
Okay.
My mother, especially, unfortunately, I guess we look more to our mothers sometimes because our fathers were working all the time. My dad was very hardworking, and he was a good union man. But
What union did he belong to?
Meat Cutters Union.
Meat Cutters Union.
But my mom is a very thoughtful person, always has been. Very faithful friend, and I'd like to think those are traits that I learned from her.
Were there other adults that influenced you profoundly as you were growing up, besides your mother and father? Were there other close relatives or family friends that had an impact on you becoming who you are today?
There were, I guess, some of my mother's friends. They had a very close group that they socialized with. Some of them had known each other since high school. They all had their kids about the same time, and they would, go to the St. Patrick's Day dances and New Year's dances and whatever together. So we saw these same families all the time.
But dance was a part of that modeling or part of that example.
Well, they encouraged all of our talents, whether it was my older brother wanting to take art classes or my wanting to dance, my younger brother wanting to play sports. They encouraged whatever we were interested in.
Were you the first teacher in the family?
Yes, I was the first one to go to college.
First one to go to college.
Yeah.
Okay. And I assume to teach as well.
And the first teacher, yes.
Was there somebody who influenced that direction that your life took?
I don't know. I always loved school.
Okay.
I had some fabulous teachers. I'm still in contact with one of my high school teachers, who at the time I had her I went to Queen of the Rosary Academy in Amityville for high school, and her name then was Sister James Augustine. Her name now is Sister Joan Vaughn because they've gone back to using their family names in the Dominican order, and I still hear from her. She's living up in Schenectady. In fact, she came to my wedding and did the readings at my wedding.
Very nice.
And she was a fabulous, fabulous teacher.
Wonderful. Okay. You anticipated that question. I was going to ask you if you had unforgettable teachers, and that certainly would qualify. Were there any other people who had a strong influence on you?
I had a number of very good teachers, but she's really the only one that springs to mind.
Okay.
A lot of the nuns were very tough, and I have one of my favorite teaching stories was from the first blackout, which I'm thinking was 66 maybe, and all the lights went out and there was no electricity. And I remember sitting at the dining room table with an arc of candles around, writing, finishing my essay. And my mother's like, "What are you doing? You can't see." And I said, "Sister Justine will take no excuses. This essay is due tomorrow morning. I must do it. Doesn't matter that there's no electricity." So that was my my recollections of.
Did you have a favorite toy that you received as a gift, either at Christmas time or for a birthday, as a child that you remember as being really a favorite?
There were a number of dolls through the years, and they changed according to whatever was popular. Mm-hmm. One of my first recollections is that for my 7th birthday, I got a Ginny doll. And I remember going out to dinner, and I got this doll, and I remember taking it with me everywhere for a very long period of time.
Okay. Was there a favorite game that you had? We all played games of one sort or another, either outside or inside. If you grew up in Long Island, you probably didn't play as many outside street games, but
we did. Back in those days, we did. We would all meet out in the street because when I was growing up, our whole street, everybody had kids. There were kids in every house, And my one uncle, my father's brother, lived one street over from us. He had 5 kids. And one of my closest cousins, Nancy, she's 1 year younger than I, we would constantly run through the yard that separated our 2 houses. And they lived on a dead-end street. So we were always in the street. We were always jumping rope and playing
Great.
hopscotch.
Those are great memories.
Doing
Wonderful
those kinds of
memories.
things.
Yeah. Do you remember your first paying job?
It was probably babysitting.
Okay.
Other than that, when I was in high school, through my mother, got a job as a student aide in the personnel office of South Huntington Schools. And that's a job I held all through high school into college. Every time I was home on vacation, every summer vacation, I worked in the personnel office of the school district.
Okay, good. What was the big family holiday? Or the biggest family holiday? I should
Probably
say.
Christmas.
Yeah. And where was it held? At your house, or was it?
It varied probably year to year. I remember when we were little, of course, we would have Christmas morning at our house, but we would always go to my grandparents, the Williams grandparents, at night, Christmas night.
Yes.
All the families would converge on my grandparents' house.
Not Christmas Eve, but Christmas Day night.
Christmas Day night, yes.
Okay. Were there outside, I should say, were there after-school interests that you had, maybe in high school, or was it all work and no play?
No, I mean, I danced. So
okay.
Still, there were
Yeah.
dance lessons a few days a week and, getting ready for performances
You bet.
and
Sure.
all those things. So
Did you have favorite subjects in school as a student?
I liked language, though in high school I studied French. Because back in those days, they used to, like, the smarter kids took French, and the less able students were steered towards Spanish. So I liked language. I always loved English. I always loved reading.
What was the subject you liked least?
Probably science, but only because I think I did not have good science teachers. They really didn't have lab situations in the high school I went to, and I think that the teachers were not as good. Because I took physics in high school, really didn't like it. When I took physics in college, I loved it. So I think it was a matter of how it was taught.
That's right. I was going to say, it is amazing how a teacher can influence a student in that way, irrespective of innate ability. It can be the passion that they bring to a subject and their ability to convey it. Did you have a favorite season as a young person?
Probably spring. And it probably still is, just because I love all the flowers coming out. I love, to this day, I love walking out and seeing what's blooming or what's growing or what's coming up now, So I probably spring.
This is a question I like to ask everyone. There are certain aromas that trigger memories of good times. What would be one such aroma that would do that for you?
I don't know that there is one. And this is going to sound mean, but my mother was not a very good cook.
Okay, no.
She didn't enjoy it. She cooked kind of because she had to. And she really didn't bake. And as soon as I got old enough, probably 12 or 13, I did all the baking in the family. And I love to cook and I love to bake. But
do the aromas, for example, associated with spring, have any meaning to you, or the ocean, or place, being in certain places, picking up an aroma, places that you've loved to be in the past, but enjoyed being?
no, yeah, I still love the smell of a Christmas tree. It's probably one of my favorites, which is why I will not go to an artificial tree ever.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
And we always have a fresh wreath on our front door. So as soon as I open the storm door, you kind of get the aroma when you open the door. It just kind of enhances the season.
Now, Kathleen, why don't you take us through all the schools that you attended and the degrees that you obtained? obtained or certifications that you achieved right from first time you walked in a school, in a classroom?
Okay. Kindergarten through 2nd grade, I went to South Huntington Schools. In 3rd through 8th grade, I went to St. U of Lincoln Elementary School in Huntington Station. And I'm not quite sure why my mother switched, because she did work for South Huntington Schools. I think it was more a matter of, in that day and age, the priest really encouraged you, if you could afford it, to support the parochial school. So when she was moving my older brother over to school, she moved me also. And I was there through 8th grade, graduated from there, and went to Queen of the Rosary Academy in Amityville, which was run by the Dominican sisters. When I graduated from there, I went to State University College of Brockport. Graduated with a BA in math, with a minor in education and a minor in history. I got my master's from C.W. Post in bilingual education. And that's probably it. I mean, there's lots of in-service work after that, but
Yeah.
it's my last degree.
Okay. Of looking back, how many years were you in public education?
Teaching?
Yeah.
31 and a half.
Looking back over that 31 and a half years, is there a greater source of pride or a sense of personal accomplishment that you can point to? Is there one or a couple of things that you can say that you were proud or happy that you were able to accomplish?
Nothing's, I can't.
Unfair question, but
Yeah, I
wanna
can't.
answer.
Nothing jumps out at me immediately. I
Okay.
mean, I love teaching,
Mhm.
and I'm happy to say I love teaching from when I started until the last day I
Yes.
taught. But it's not like,
Did you have what some might call the worst day of your professional life?
oh yeah. And one of them was definitely the last year I was teaching. I had one of the most difficult classes I ever had. And you would think, I tended to think, after doing something for 30 years, nobody could throw you. I had a class of all of the students who had failed the Spanish proficiency exam, who were repeating the course. Some were special needs, some were learning disabled, some were just coming out of jail. It was an incredible group. And it was the first one and only time I actually had a fight in my room. I had 2 girls. One girl jumped on top of the other, and they were literally rolling around on the floor during my 7th period class, and I'm like, I can't believe this is happening. That was like,
Yeah.
they were just a very tough group.
That'll traumatize anybody, I would think. Yeah. Was there a favorite year that you had of all?
Again, my job in Brentwood changed over the years. And it kept changing and being different. So I don't know if there's any one
Okay.
specific
Yes, they
thing.
changed so many times,
Yeah.
right.
And I liked it all. I liked, I taught math, I taught Spanish, I taught math in Spanish. And
What year was it that you came to Brentwood?
I started in January of '74.
How did you hear about an opening?
This is interesting. I came back from Peru in October of '73. And everyone said, you're never going to find a job. I mean, the school year has started. The best you can hope for is you can sub here or there. So I did do a little bit of subbing in South Huntington Schools because of my, they knew me. But every Monday morning, I went with another unemployed friend to the library to read the education openings in the New York Times. We didn't buy the paper. We went to read it in the library on Monday morning. And I think it was the very same Monday, early in November, there was an ad from Brentwood looking for teachers who were certified in math and science who were bilingual. And my friend also found an ad looking for a resident director at Stony Brook University, I think. We both answered the ads, and we both got jobs.
Excellent. Boy, what a match.
Yeah.
Who interviewed you?
I believe my first interview was with Nikki Nin, head of the bilingual department at the time. And then she sent me over to interview with Steve Howland and Ruth Rosenthal at East Junior High.
Kathy, if you hadn't decided to take that job offer and teach, what might have been a second choice of career other than teaching? Was there something else that you ever considered?
No.
No. Okay.
No, I always,
Okay.
as I said, I always liked school, and again, going back to the times, young women, I think, didn't see as many choices as young women do now. I mean, you said, oh, I can be a teacher, a nurse, a secretary. You know, I mean, those were kind of the job role models that we had. And I always loved school, so I figured I'll teach.
Yes. Excellent. Do you remember from that interview with Nikki Nin or with Ruth Rosenthal or Steve Howland, do you remember any of the questions that any one of them might have asked you?
No.
Okay. All right. And what, when you go to your assignment, which was where? What building?
East Junior High.
And you started at East. Who were some of the people that you worked with that year? And what was the feeling that you had once you established yourself?
Well, it was an interesting beginning because when I started at East, it was January, so it was mid-year. They were on a split session, so there were 2 sessions, and because they wanted me to teach 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, I covered both sessions. So I had kind of banker's hours. I was working like 9 to 3. So I was working part of the morning session, part of the afternoon session. And I was starting a new program. They were starting the transitional bilingual program at the junior high level. So they had, of course, English as second language program before, but they had never had instruction in subjects for these students. So they pulled all the 7th, 8th, and 9th graders who were very limited English speakers and gave them to me. And I had to come up with, math and science lessons to do with them. And I really, in the beginning, had no materials at all. Which is probably good that I was just coming from a Peace Corps experience because, after improvising for 2 years in Peru, it was, and the people at East were extremely welcoming. I went to the science department and I said, what do you have that I can use? And they were Paul Fine, Cliff Childs, Bob DiCostanzo, Mark Rabin. They all were just like, here, this is what we do. You can borrow our materials. You can, they were fabulous.
Isn't that the way you would think that it was supposed to be, that people
Yes.
would do that, but it doesn't always happen?
No, which I have to say, East Junior at that time, I later found out, had a terrible reputation as being a tough population to work with, the students. It was a wonderful place to work. Everyone helped everybody else. It was a true family feeling. And our administrators, Steve especially, because he was my principal there for 17 years, he kind of, if he felt you were doing a good job, he just kind of let you alone. And he let you do your thing. And if he thought there was a problem, he would certainly let you know. But, my feeling about Steve is that he really felt he hired good people, and if he had faith in his staff, he let them teach. And there was a real family feeling at East. We all got together. We all, liked each other. We all helped each other. It was a great place to work.
And what did you teach at East then?
Well, again, it changed. I started as a bilingual math and science teacher for 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. And I believe, though I'm not positive about this, that was under some kind of a grant. I believe it was a state bilingual education grant. Because then, during those years, I went for my master's in bilingual education at Post. And I believe as soon as I got my master's, which was, I think, May of '77, the grant ended, and they said, okay, we don't have the money for this anymore. But since I was certified in both math and Spanish at that point, Steve was like, okay, you want to stay here and just teach math? And I'm like, sure. So for a few years, I taught math, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, depending on what they needed. And then at some point, I don't remember the year, 80-something, New York State made language a requirement for all 9th graders again. And Steve said, aren't you certified in Spanish? How'd you like to teach them Spanish? I'm like, sure, I'll teach Spanish. So the first year, I think I had like 2 math classes, 3 Spanish classes, and then I switched to all Spanish my last few years at East. So it kind of changed.
Was there your student teaching or your college education in Brockport that prepared you for what you encountered in Brentwood, or was it the Peace Corps experience in Peru that provided the basis for much of what you brought to the classroom?
It was probably a little of both, because my student teaching experience was an inner city experience in Rochester. And I remember it as being a good experience.
Okay.
But, very varied population, and so that was okay. And Peace Corps, though, definitely helped me with the beginning. Coming into a situation where, no one had done it before, and they just kind of said, do this. Yes. With no materials,
yes,
no one else who was doing it that I could go to and say, right. How do you do this?
Right.
So my first year probably was not my best. I probably struggled a little bit with that. I got through it, and I'm sure I taught the kids something, but I definitely got better after that.
Now, what happened did you leave East eventually?
Yes, I left East when they opened the freshman center.
And so you went to the freshman center?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And Peter Perlow was?
No, John Galaris was principal when they opened the freshman center.
Mm-hmm.
And it probably would have been a more difficult decision, but the year that we're going to open the center is the same year that Steve Hallen retired. So it made it easier to leave East because there was going to be a new administration there. And most of my friends, very close friends, not most, a lot of my very close friends were 9th grade teachers, and they were going to the center. So I said, okay, I'll throw my name in, and I'll go up to the 9th grade with you.
So you went with John Galaris and his crew?
Yes.
There. And how long were you there?
14 and a half years, I guess. 14 years, 15 years. 15.
Is that where you ended your career?
Yes, that's where I retired from.
Okay. I see. Now, question that has less to do with job description than it has to do with you and your goals. What did you try to accomplish? What was your purpose in coming in every morning, bright and early, to meet that group of youngsters and do something with them, give them something, regardless of what the subject matter was? What was your purpose?
I thought of my purpose most of the time as trying to make the kids as successful as I could. Trying to give them a sense of accomplishment from wherever they were to whatever the next step could be where they could go.
So you're not just talking about subject discipline or subject matter, you're talking about a life skill of success. Mm-hmm. Did you find it increasingly difficult to do that with the emphasis upon testing, or is that just my bias?
By the time I got to the center, I was working mainly in Spanish, and the Spanish testing schedule is not as odious as some of the others. I mean, there is the minimum competency test that the kids take at the end of 8th grade, but it's a fairly easy test to get through. it's a fairly realistic test, I think, so that wasn't awful. You didn't have to spend your whole time teaching to the test. And first year Spanish is a lot of fun. When you're first introducing a language, you can do all the stuff with food and clothing and colors and lots of projects, and all those things are on that minimum competency test, so that wasn't so bad. And then we didn't have a Regents in 9th grade. The Regents isn't until the end of 10th or 11th grade, so we really weren't teaching to a state test, so I didn't feel that kind of pressure in Spanish.
Did you have enough time to get involved in the BTA or in the professional organization at all?
In my early years, I was very active, because at my first 17 years in Brentwood, I was single, so I had tons of time. I got very active. I became a delegate fairly early, I think, in my career, and I was chief delegate for a number of years at East Junior.
Okay. Who were some of the people that you worked with in the BTA, with the BTA at that time? Do you remember?
Well, Jack Zuckerman was president when I first became involved, and then of course Les became president after that. So, I worked with both of them in my union work. But again, because East was such a happy place most of the time, it was a very easy place to be chief delegate. Because if there was a problem that got to a grievance level, we had a reasonable administration. So you go in and you talk to them, and we could usually solve most things at a building level, which was a wonderful thing. But then I would go to union meetings, and I would sit and listen to people, no offense, but they were mainly the high school people at that time, who were just rabidly screaming about it's us against them, and I'm like, no. It was just so much easier, my experience, than what I was hearing from other places.
Yes. And with being the daughter of a union man, your father, who was active, I don't know if he was active, but he was a member.
No, he was a member.
Yes, but you saw the value of what the union could bring when it was needed.
And I still believe in it. I still believe that in order to get, a decent wage and the benefits that you would like, you need a union or an organization to negotiate for you.
Have you ever been afraid to go into the classroom? Well, I know that last year,
No, I wasn't afraid.
Okay.
I was never afraid. I would grit my teeth and go in strong with a smile. I always started every class with a smile. I tried to think of different ways I could manage that class. And it got to the point, and no other class did I ever do this, I literally never turned my back. I started putting my notes on overhead so I could always face them and not have to turn and write on the board, and that worked. But I would just try different things to manage them. But no, I was never afraid.
What were the kinds of things that would be most likely to get under your skin, to make you angry?
When the students were nasty to one another. I always wanted them to treat me and each other with respect. You mentioned before, it's not just subject matter. You're trying to teach them how to be, respectful human beings so that when they leave the school situation, they can be successful. And it just angered me when they would put each other down. That was probably the thing that bothered me most.
Yes. Now, you taught during a span of years where you saw major changes in the Brentwood community. You saw the demographics of the community change and the school population change. How did that affect your performance, or did it?
It didn't. Being Spanish speaking and working, when I went back to the freshman center, they actually gave me back a bilingual math class for most of my time there, because they needed someone who could do it. And I loved working with the Spanish community, so the growth of the Spanish community was wonderful for me.
Okay. But that having been said, at a certain point, after 31 years, you started to think about what's next. And then you decided that it was time, and you were put in for your retirement. What date did you decide ultimately what year was it that you decided to retire?
I had decided to retire as soon as I was able. You know, because I had over 30 years in the year that I turned 55. So
Yes.
I put in my papers, you know, to retire.
I'm sorry, what year was it?
2005.
2005. Okay, I want to talk with you about that and what you've been doing since, but something occurs to me that I neglected to ask you about, and that is, were you at East Junior High during the incident when Bobby Wicks sadly took his own life
Yes, I
in
was.
front of a class?
Mm-hmm.
Do you, and I can only imagine that that day stays with you.
Yes, it does.
Describe what happened from your perspective from that day while you were there, and what you saw and what you remember.
It was 7th period. I was teaching a math class. I had a classroom with windows that faced the back athletic fields. And it was the opposite end of the building from where the incident took place. That was on the 2nd floor, other wing. And I was teaching my class, and all of a sudden one of the kids was like, Miss, look. And I look out the window, and they're like SWAT team guys in full regalia running by the window. And my usual response is, oh, do problem number 10, you know, has nothing to do with us, you know. And then there was a announcement over the loudspeaker, you know, lock your doors, do not give out any passes. And I thought, oh, okay, something's happening here. But still, had no idea. So then the kids were all crowding toward the window. I'm like, no, that's probably not a good idea. I said, I don't know what's going on exactly, but let's get away from the windows. And I think I put the blinds down, and we all kind of sat. And I said, they'll tell us what's going on sooner or later, but right now they just don't want you in the hallways. And I had no idea what was going on at that point. And then I believe it was Mark Neisowitz, because he was either assistant principal at that point or interning as an administrator, came to the door and said, take your class, go down to the music wing, out the door, down the street. And they were evacuating each room. And it wasn't until, you know, we really didn't know what was going on until we got off school grounds. And then they said, you know, the buses are going to be in the shopping center. You know, stay with your kids, get them on the right buses. And then they said, you know, there's somebody in the school with a gun. But at that point, we still didn't know, like, where, why.
Yes.
So with kids, we stayed with the kids, got the kids on the buses, whatever. And then they said, well, you can't go to your car because the windows of Peggy's classroom, where Bob Wicks was, faced the parking lot. So they said, you can either call for someone to come pick you up, you know, or you can go back in the school building. So a number of us, again, I was single, I had really nobody to go home to that would, you know, a bunch of us stayed. And we stayed down in the cafeteria, and at that point we knew that Steve had been shot. And we just stayed, and little by little the kids were released, you know, and we were just trying to calm the kids down, and, you know.
It was probably late, maybe close to 11 o'clock
Yeah,
before
by
you
it
left.
ended, yeah. It ended, right, I remember it being right around 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And then when I got home, I didn't realize that it had been on the news everywhere. I got a call from someone who used to work at East, who lived in Baltimore, you know, asking, you know, are you okay? You know, how is everybody?
Every major newspaper, including the New York Times, had coverage of that because it was the first incident of its kind since maybe the 1920s, I think.
Right.
Since then, of course, we've seen...
But I have to say, like, and I think of it all the time, that during Columbine, the way that was handled, the way our incident was handled seems so much better. The SWAT team immediately were in the building managing the situation, as opposed to standing outside waiting to see what would happen. And when I looked at that at Columbine, I'm like, why did they wait 4 hours? This is what they're trained to do. They're trained to go in and take care of it, which is what they did. I can't praise, how Suffolk County Police handle that enough, because they really, who knows what he would have done if it would have been worse, but they got everybody out of the building, other than the kids in that one classroom, without incident.
That certainly had to be one of the worst memories that you've taken with you from your years, that whole day. Was, on a more positive note, was there, again, this is a difficult question. You may not be able to isolate one memory or one thought, but I'll ask it anyway and give you a chance to respond. Was there some accomplishment with an individual student or with a program or with something that you taught that you are particularly proud of having accomplished?
Again, I can't think of anything
that's why I said I didn't want to put
specific
you on the spot with that.
right now. There are certain kids I know that I think I encouraged, especially some of the bilingual kids who unfortunately, what they would do in ninth grade is they would put all the kids in one class. There were no ability levels. And some of the kids I had, especially in later years, they were coming from all different countries. And some of them came with excellent educations and were really honor students.
Wow.
And again, because of my relationship with people in the building, I was able to have some of my math students sit in on Regents level or honors level classes, and they were able to take the Regents and pass and accelerate themselves. But it was their ability.
Yes.
And because I had colleagues who were willing to, officially we couldn't do the guidance switch until we knew it would work.
Yes.
But it was kind of an informal arrangement.
That's neat.
Where they would go and sit in the algebra class or the geometry class, and if they could do the
But that was
work.
an opportunity that you afforded them that they wouldn't have had
Right.
otherwise. Oh, that's wonderful. Wonderful. Do you remember your first year's salary at Brentwood? How much you made the first year?
I have no recollection.
Okay.
Though I just went through a file not too long ago, and I had all of my contracts, I had all of my evaluations. I'm like, why am I saving these?
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
It must not have been very important to you because clearly, and we're going to talk about this too, you're a person who has given so much, not just in the Peace Corps, but even in life after the Peace Corps. You are big on volunteering, so we're going to talk about that before we're finished here. Is there anything that you would have done differently when you rethink through situations that you've been in or approaches that you used? Have you ever had second thoughts about something that you did or would you like to have done differently?
I was pretty tough. I was a pretty strict teacher. I think I might have lightened up a little bit in my later years. But no,
Okay.
nothing major.
All right. You mentioned Bobby Kennedy's assassination. You weren't teaching yet when that happened.
No.
You were.
I was graduating
But there was
high
a
school.
lot of other history that happened while you were in the classroom. A lot of other important events that happened that we could talk about. But I would rather talk about the things that you miss or the things that you don't miss about being an active teacher.
Okay. I don't miss getting up at 5:30 in the morning, even though I do get up early still every morning because I have breakfast with my daughter before she goes to school. But I can do it in my bathrobe and have that second cup of coffee and watch the Today Show. So I don't miss that. I don't miss driving to school in the snow, all those kinds of things. And I'm very fortunate in that since I retired, I have been working. What I would miss would be working with kids, but I've been working in the mentoring program for the last 5 years. So 1 or 2 days a week, I'm still in Brentwood Schools, and I'm still, having contact with teachers and kids. So that has been, wonderful. So I can still, I've mentored a number of bilingual math teachers. So I can still, when they're doing a lesson, I'll say, do you want me to help? And they'll go, yes. And I can still walk around and talk to kids and help them with problems and whatever. And so I still have some contact with kids, which is what I would miss if I weren't doing that.
Okay, excellent, excellent. So you've been doing that for how many years now?
This is my 5th year.
5th year. Who else is mentoring with you?
This year there's only a handful of people.
Cass Howard?
Cass Howard, Steve Rochester, Anne-Marie DeCibio.
Is that a funded program? And is there any risk that will end?
Oh yeah. We thought it was going to end this year. Mainly because, New York State now requires mentoring for first-year teachers. And Brentwood was really trying hard not to hire anyone this year. So if there are no first-year teachers, there's no need for mentors. But with the size of a district like Brentwood, they ended up having to hire some. I believe there are no mentors on the elementary level this year, though. I think they didn't hire anyone on the elementary level.
Do you have any idea what the population, what the size of the district is today?
No. I just know it's I think it's
still
student-wise the largest
on
on Long Island, but no, I don't know a number.
Okay. Is there anything that you would like to have been able to accomplish while you were a full-time active teacher that you weren't able to see done?
My dream would have been to reorganize the bilingual department. in the course of my time in Brentwood, people misunderstand what bilingual education is, and I think sometimes it's not always explained, and sometimes it's not always run the way it should be, in my humble opinion. And I think the kids kind of get lost in the shuffle sometimes, which I would.
So if you were to reorganize it, it would be with the kids in mind, to reorganize it?
Oh, definitely. Because you want, again, it's all about success for the kids.
Yes.
And now there are so many more testing requirements for them to get a diploma. So you want to do things to make it as easy for the kids to be successful in that road as possible.
Yes.
So part of it, a bilingual program should support their native language, but have a large emphasis on English and transitioning into the English-speaking classes, while maintaining their Spanish. I have no problem with that. I value bilingualism. It got me my job.
Mm-hmm.
But I think sometimes the English component gets lost, and the kids in the high school especially suffer because they can't pass that English entrance. They can't pass the test that they need to get that diploma, no matter, they're just unrealistic expectations given the background that they have.
This kind of grows out of the question that I asked about accomplishment. If, given what you have experienced and given what you know, there have to be a number of things that you would love to see changed over system-wide. There have to be a couple, maybe 2 or 3 things that if you could wave a magic wand and make them either go away or transform them, you would like to see that happen for kids. What kinds of things would you think are really important to the whole system of public education that we address, or that finally get some attention?
Well, I think there's too much emphasis on testing. I see this now with the math teachers that I work with. In addition to the state test, at the middle school and high school level, they have quarterly exams, and there have to be at least 20 or 30 instructional days that are taken up with either testing or preparing for the test or reviewing the test. And it just seems that the time would be better used on actual instruction as opposed to preparing for tests or testing. There's just way too much testing.
That's
the biggie. That's the first one that jumps to mind.
Okay.
I'd also like, now that I'm mentoring, I think, and I know there's been some talk about this in the news, about better preparing teachers for what they actually face in the classroom.
How do you do that? Besides a student teaching experience where you're doing it on the job and learning that way.
I think mentoring helps, but I think also perhaps there should be a first year ongoing orientation class that all first year teachers should have to go to. Because even as a mentor, and even though I've done this 5 years, there are sometimes you just assume knowledge that isn't there. Like, what do you do with 5-week reports? Or how do you set up a grading system? Or how do you set up a discipline plan? And and they don't necessarily get that in student teaching, because when they go to work with a supervising teacher, they're using their grading system. They're using their discipline plan that teacher has set up. And when you're actually put in your own classroom for the first time, I kind of feel like there's not a lot of nitty-gritty kind of support.
Yes.
Not subject matter necessarily,
Yes.
but more day-to-day, how to organize, how to plan, how to best use your time. I mean, that's what I do as a mentor, but still some things fall through the cracks. And I'm thinking if it were more organized in terms of what does a first year teacher really need to know, like for the first 5 weeks, what should you, and maybe half of your course would be enough. What are the nitty-gritty little things? And now it's even more. There's all this computer stuff that they have to know at the high school. Everything is e-school. Everything is, and that in itself, how do you do that? How do you input information? How do you retrieve information? How do you keep track of things? I don't know if they get enough instruction in that, because everybody seems confused. And it doesn't always work.
Now, you talk about managing time. What about your time, since you have been, quote, retired, unquote? Are you just, when I say just, are you confining the use of your time to mentoring, or are you doing other things?
Oh, I'm doing lots of other things.
What are you doing? What have you been doing since you retired?
Before I retired, if someone had asked me, what do you want to do? I would have said, I want to exercise more, I want to volunteer a couple places, and I want to travel more.
Okay.
And I have done all of those things.
Okay.
I'm better about exercising, getting to curves, and taking dance class and taking yoga. I volunteer at the local library, delivering books to the homebound. I volunteer at my church's food pantry. I've been called on for a couple of other things. A year and a half, I volunteered teaching English at a program run by nuns in Huntington Station. But what I found was that 1 year, I was mentoring 2 days a week, and I was volunteering 3 days a week, and I was way too busy. And I was like, no, this feels like work again.
Yes, yes.
So I pulled back from the teaching commitment. So I do have at least one full day when I have no, that's just for me to do.
It has to be fun.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't want to feel pressured. I'm beginning to feel pressured. This is not what it's supposed to be when I'm retired.
Hey, Kathy, if you were to give advice to a person coming in to do some of what you've done as a beginning teacher, what is the advice that you give them? What do you tell them?
Think about the kids. Think about the kids and what they need, because it's really about them.
Yes.
And sometimes they feel constricted, the teachers I've worked with, by their curriculum or by the time allotments that they're given. And I'm like, if you don't think that this concept can be taught in 1 day, then you have to continue it a second day, because it's really about the kids understanding what it is you're trying to teach and being able to do it. So you have to think about the kids.
If you were to finish the phrase, based on your experience, Brentwood teachers are,
Extremely hardworking.
and given the students that you have come in contact with and you have had, Brentwood students are,
Interesting and challenging.
yes. What haven't we talked about that you want to make sure we get on this? For family and friends and for posterity, what needs to be said that we haven't addressed?
I don't know.
Do you have a 5-year plan? Do you have something that you want to accomplish in the next few years?
No,
So-
I want to just keep doing what I'm doing. You
Okay.
know, I want to do more traveling. My husband really doesn't enjoy traveling, but my daughter does. So she and I, you know, on her breaks from college, may try to get some places. I'm hoping she's hoping to do a semester or a year abroad. I'll definitely go visit her. No, I hope to just keep doing what I'm doing because I'm enjoying what I'm doing.
Kathleen Williams Ging, thank you so much for giving us your time and for telling your story.
You're welcome.